Welcome back to Hype Girl Energy. I'm super excited for my guest today, Ann Thomas, the CEO of The Children's Place. Ann, thanks so much for being here. I'm super excited.
Thank you, Catherine. It's an honor to be part of this.
You've done a lot of work in this space. Tell me, what moved you to get into the world of helping children in crisis?
It's a great question. I was thinking about that as I was preparing for today, and I'm like, how did I end up here? My original trajectory, I was going to travel the world and wanted to work in international communications or business. And then life happened in my family. I had a brother that was diagnosed with cancer, and we went through a really hard time. And our family had a lot of resources, but there was one person that really made a difference, and it was a social worker at the Children's Hospital. And she was so phenomenal to my brother and to my parents, supporting them through this, really hard time. And even to myself, she just made us feel safer. And I remember that being a transformative moment of like, who is she? What is this person? She wasn't a doctor. And got to know her, and she was a clinical social worker and worked with families when they were going through hard things. And that really changed my perspective on what I wanted to do. I knew I always wanted to work with people. And so that started changing into this understanding that hard things happen to children and hard things happen to families. And I just was drawn into that field at that point in time.
So what did your trajectory look like? How did you get from that point to where you are today?
A lot of steps, honestly.
Yeah.
I lived on the East Coast, was going to school in Washington, D.C. I turned around and decided I wanted a real community place. My parents were originally from Kansas City, so my dad said, why don't you think about KU? And so went to KU. They had an outstanding social work program, finished my bachelor's degree, and then got my master's degree in social work. Met my husband, but so we sort of planted ourselves here. But the thing that was really fascinating is in my master's degree program, I had to do 2 different internships. And the first one was at a local agency, Operation Breakthrough. And that was my first real experience of working with families living in poverty. And the amount of traumatic events and what we saw happening, the chaos that often happened in lives, not everybody's, but in so many. I was privy to that, and it really just fascinated me. I wanted to learn more. My second year, I was at Children's Mercy Hospital working in the oncology area, the job I thought I really wanted, and did that for a year. And then when I graduated, Children's Mercy didn't have a position at the time, and Operation Breakthrough called me, and they said, hey, we would like to hire our first full-time child therapist. Would you be interested? And I thought, I have a lot to learn. I said, would you be willing to help me? And they were. And so I began a 14-year experience at Operation Breakthrough. And it was the most challenging because we didn't have the infrastructure at the time. I was still learning the craft of child therapy. Our community didn't have a lot of resources at the time. And so really putting the pieces together. When I left there, I was had a department of 7. We provided mental health for the young children. We also had adult mental health. We had a psychiatry program so people, could get psychiatric help if they needed it. So we just built something. And that was really powerful. It suddenly became not just the power of one in an interaction with a child or a family. It was creating a whole department that could have so much more influence, and ultimately changing the culture of an agency or how people see early mental health in children.
Yeah.
And then I had the opportunity to come to the Children's Place. And at that point, I was moving out of the direct practice and doing less therapy and moved more into the administration side. But that's always given me such a different lens, I think, in being a leader. I have the therapeutic eyes of how to do things, but leading a social service agency with understanding what it really feels like to do the work, I think has been helpful at times.
Absolutely.
And given me a lot more understanding of what direct service looks like, what does self-care look like, what does an organization have to do to take care of its staff. And so I see that as probably the gift that came along in my experiences, was really wanting to create an agency that took care of obviously the littles, but definitely the bigs.
Yeah.
I tell everyone, when I when I was first offered the job as the CEO here, my husband said, you need to figure out how you're going to lead. And I thought that was interesting. And I was like, what do you mean? I mean, I've been a vice president. What do you mean I have to figure out how I'm going to lead? And he was quick to remind me, you're in a different spot now. And one of the things I spent time thinking about is, how am I going to make decisions here? And I tell this to everybody when I meet them. I said, the first thing I do is I'm going to make a decision on what's best for children. We serve kids under the age of 8. They don't have a voice. They are here because something's happened to them. First, what's best for the children. And a close second is what's best for the staff. And then I'll figure out everybody else's needs, and I will hear it. But at the end of the day, that is sort of my marker of when I have to make really hard decisions. What's the impact going to be on the littles and the bigs in this building?
Yeah.
So
that leads me to my next question. Obviously, you're leading this organization. Like, what does leadership mean to you, and how do you make those hard decisions when you're factoring in, obviously, the kiddos first, your staff second? How do you make the decisions?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've been having quite a few conversations with friends of mine in the more corporate world, and I love for-purpose organizations, but the management style is very different.
Yeah.
It is a collective. It is building consensus, and our outputs is, how successful are we to mission? So the question of, how do you lead in this type of organization is, you have to be a good listener. I think you have to, at times, put your own ego to the side and listen. And I feel like I have to, I appreciate how wise people are around me, building a really strong team. I can't know everything.
Yeah.
And really leaning on others and building them up. I tell my leadership team all the time is, I don't ever want you to leave, but if you do leave, I want you to lead an organization in a really amazing way. So my goal is to make you the strongest for-cause leaders as possible. And that means, yes, this decision tree. Money and budgets and making ends meet is, right up there in this for-cause world. We don't sell more widgets and then have a better bottom line. Where it's like, are we getting our kids healing? If kids are healing, we are doing an exceptional job and are very wealthy, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't show up on a balance sheet in the same way.
What do you feel like with the children you're serving and the families and the support systems that you're serving? Tell me a little bit about what that looks like. How does the organization run? What does a child coming into the Children's Place, what do they experience here?
Yeah, that's a great question. We, again, only serve children under the age of 8, and that is very unique to our region. There's not very many of us in the entire country, and people say, oh, we do children's mental health. Most places start at like age 5. We do developmental testings as young as 6 weeks. Hard things happen to babies too. So we specialize in understanding what happens to that young developing brain after something stressful happens, whatever the traumatic event may be. So we offer a range of services to meet whatever's happened. And so we start with developmental assessments. So a child may come in here right after, within the first few weeks of being removed from their home because of child abuse. That child comes in and has a developmental assessment, and we see what the stress has done. Are they falling behind in their language or in their motor skills and their cognitive skills? And at that point, we give the adults in their lives some resources, opportunities, information. From there, we also offer outpatient therapy. So kiddos can come in after any kind of event and get either individual or family therapy. When you think about those children coming into the place, we see a range of things. It may be a child that was in a car accident, like a single incident traumatic event. We see children that come here after medical traumas, having a hard time going to sleep, or kiddos then don't want to separate from their parents. They're scared of things. 2, we work with children that have experienced, multiple traumatic events and, have been victims of abuse. So that program serves a range.
Yeah.
We do family services. One of the things I always say a lot is being a parent's tough, but when you're parenting a child that's experienced trauma, it's even more challenging.
Yeah.
Some of the things you have to do are counterintuitive. So supporting families, providing parent education. We offer adult mental health services, helping adults relook at some of their experiences or how they experience the trauma. And then finally, our fourth program is really what I think we are most known for. We like to call ourselves the intensive care of working with young traumatized children. And it's a day treatment program. We have almost 50 kids that are transported here by bus every day. They are placed, we have classrooms, so they're socialized in a high quality early ed experience. But the classrooms have 8 kids, there's 2 teachers, and then when they're here, their time is back-to-back therapeutic supports. So they're getting mental health therapy, they're getting speech therapy, occupational therapy, music, art therapy, plus a lot of, we called it childhood restored, a lot of positive kid fun activities to counterbalance maybe some of those negative memories that are in their life with things that every child should get to do, snow cone machines and, bubble machines and, celebrating lots of different events just to provide joy, again, to help kids heal.
Your day treatment kiddos, how long are they typically here? What does their time in the children's place look like?
We're very treatment focused in the sense, so average length of stay is about 19 months. So we assess them and then establish goals, and then when they meet those goals, our goal is to get them back out into the community, back into their early ed centers, Head Start programs, wherever it would be. That these events in their lives are part of their story, but they don't define the trajectory of their life. And I think that's the really important part about trauma is it can be hard. With support, you heal, but it also makes you more resilient in life. And, so we have to see the hope that can come when hard things happen. Yeah. And so our kids, again, they're little, they heal, they change, they transform. The average length of stay is 19 months.
And then the children's place does something special. So you bus a lot of your kiddos in on the daily. What does that program look like, and who came up with the thought of okay, we're going to make sure we can do whatever we can do to get the kids here on a daily basis?
Providing transportation, going to their door, picking up the child and bringing them here was a way to really decrease some of the stress in the adults' lives. It also guarantees that their attendance is really strong. We don't really have attendance issues. I mean, little kids always get sick, so
sure.
We've got that and snow days. But kids are here then every day getting a high dosing of that therapeutic support. So without the buses, I think how well children do here would be different. But busing is our second largest expense for this organization. It costs us over $7,000 a year per child. Wow. It is a huge, huge commitment this organization has made to ensure that children can be here to receive the treatment they need.
Amazing. And then speaking of buses,
I know.
The new therapy bus. Talk to me about that. What it looks like. I mean, I've been in it. It's amazing. But for the people who don't know what it is, talk about the therapy bus.
Yes. So I think one of the things that we continue to explore is how do we push our services out. There are so many young children that have experienced hard things. And again, let's get in and provide treatment now before it becomes a bigger issue. So it was thinking about access. How do we provide greater access? Not everybody can come to the bricks and mortar place for lots of reasons. And we started asking families why, what makes it challenging. And it was interesting. It's changing work schedules. I can't make a 3:00 Wednesday appointment every week because my work schedule changes. It's siblings. What do I do with my other 2 kids? I have to haul them there, and it's just chaotic and hard.
Totally.
And then families are just busy. And so the idea came, because we have fleet buses, because we go out and pick up children, we're very comfortable with the bus idea, taking care of buses. And it was one day I was looking at one of our buses that we were going to have to rotate off the fleet, and I'm like, gosh, what a shame. What else could you do with this? And then it was just hit me. I'm like, why don't we turn this into a therapy room on wheels and have the therapy room with a therapist go to the places where children are spending their time, which is their early ed programs, daycare centers, pre-K programs. And so that began the several-year planning process and fundraising. We bought a brand new bus, had it retrofitted, had it made into this dream space. It doesn't look like well, the outside looks like a bus, a very colorful bus.
It's so cute.
It is so cute. But the inside truly looks like any one of our playrooms or therapy rooms that we use for young children. And then we have created connections with a variety of early ed programs. They are the host sites. They inform all of the families at their center that mental health services would be available if they're interested. Families that are interested, call us. We set up the assessments, the developmentals. They sign all the paperwork, and then we schedule. And on Monday, we go to site XYZ, and we see 3 or 4 kids maybe individually whose parents have given permission. And so we are taking therapy on the road, going to where children are spending their time. Parents then don't have to leave work. We call them, we Zoom with them, we're communicating with them regularly, but that way their kids are getting the mental health support.
Amazing.
I'm really proud of it. It's transforming. It is making it more. It's trying to decrease the stigma associated with mental health. You know, no child that comes into the playroom realizes this is therapy. We start with, hard things have happened to you, but this is a place you're safe, and this is a place you can show all your feelings, but they're playing it out and learning, and then we're learning how to provide coping skills for them and their family.
And work through it. And then speaking of partner organizations, obviously the bus is going around, but do you all partner with other nonprofits in town, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think there's a really wonderful pipeline that does exist. I love that concept is we all need to play in the sandbox well. We are a specialty niche. I mean, we are the ones in this community that serve the littles.
Yes.
So I think the handoff is pretty great. Some of our partner organizations that do amazing work that specialize in certain types of treatment also are the first to say, but if it's a kiddo under the age of 5, send them to the children's place, and then we'll, graduate them into our services later on. And we do the same thing. We have siblings and other people. So, we're handing off, usually because of age, to different organizations. And so I think it's important to have these partnerships. This work of mental health, of community stressors, it's too big for one organization. And so you have to lean on your partners and trust them.
Yeah.
And I think that makes our entire community a stronger network for families.
Well, especially when there's so many amazing organizations that have their specialty of what they're focusing on, right? So if you have, it feels, especially with how community-oriented Kansas City is, for organizations to partner with one another instead of, the phrase I like to use is operating in your genius zone. So, are you operating in your genius zone, or are you stretching when there's someone else or another organization that can be helping?
I love that terminology, and I think that's really true. That's one of the things that makes me really proud of the Children's Place. We are coming close to our 50th anniversary.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Crazy.
And one of the things that I just, I'm temporarily leading this organization, right?
Yep.
This whole place will exist a lot longer than I will. But it's this idea that we have stayed true to our mission from the beginning.
Yeah.
It started with a pediatrician at Children's Mercy Hospital the child abuse laws had changed in Missouri, and he started seeing a lot more children being identified as having experienced some sort of physical abuse and sexual abuse, and he realized there was nothing in our community to support those kiddos. One person had an idea, brought people together, and together they created a place for children to be safe. And because of that, I see that mission has been firm.
Yeah.
We have not chased money. We've not tried to become the experts in domestic violence. We've not become, experts in just one type of treatment. We've become experts in little kids. And that's really nice to just say, this is who we are. And to other things, take it,
Yeah.
So-and-so's better at doing that. They're the experts at that. That's not us.
Yep.
Be really, really good at the one thing you're charged with doing.
So speaking of money, obviously you're a nonprofit. Donations are huge. What do you feel like are the key components of what helps this place operate, and what is the biggest need that you guys have as an organization?
It's interesting, we are also one of the organizations, we bill Medicaid, we bill insurance companies. I mean, we are tapping into resources if families have them. But yet those reimbursement rates only cover about 45% of the true cost. And part of the true cost is we believe the quality and what it feels, looks, what a child should experience should be top notch here. We're not letting that reimbursement rate determine what kind of services we give.
Yeah.
We're like, what's the best? How do we get there? How do we train people? How do we hire them? Here's what we get from a reimbursement rate, and then that delta becomes what fundraising is responsible for. So 55% of our budget, we are out there, again, relying on our community to help us improve, the caliber of what we can do for these kiddos.
That's a substantial amount. It's 55%.
Yeah. We start over, like every year, it's like we got to raise over almost $3 million. And so it's a ton of energy.
Yeah, it is.
And what we need, we have grants. We need our community to be aware. We need our community to understand that young children do have mental health issues, and because their brain is developing, if we don't get in and help them heal, it does change the trajectory of their life. It influences their ability to learn. It influences their ability to have healthy relationships. We don't need more anxiety in our lives, right?
Totally.
We need things to help that young brain overcome that. And so I think for the community to understand the importance of early childhood mental health and early intervention, it's also important for the community to trust these organizations, that we are experts in what we do. And, we are experts in early childhood mental health, but we're also really good at running a business.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that, if I was to get on my soapbox of things I've learned, is how sometimes I think there's a bias thinking like we're not a strong business. I can say our business model is kind of flawed because we don't charge if families can't pay. We aren't going to turn anyone away.
Yeah.
Again, our reimbursement rate doesn't match the cost, so we have to do this fundraising. But again, from a mission standpoint and doing the work, we are incredibly creative, hardworking business people that have to maximize any kind of resources we get to deliver a completely different service. And so it is incredibly complicated.
Sounds like it.
But also really gratifying. And when the days are hard, I look out my windows over the playground and I'm like, these numbers aren't working, but we're going to figure it out for those little people that are out there playing.
Totally.
And so it's great inspiration.
Obviously, fundraising dollars, you have a few different auxiliary boards that help with that. You've got your board of directors. So what does the fundraising look like? I mean, you've got events. Tell me about what you guys do over here.
I think it's like a multi-prong approach.
Yep.
Leave no stone unturned.
Totally.
I think what's really unique about the Children's Place, and again, kudos to those long before me, but because it was started by one person who reached into his community, this sense of we need everybody to be part of this agency started. And so what happened was, people coming in to volunteer, and we have a board of directors that's governance. And that's a wonderful group. But what started to happen about 30 years ago was a couple of women were volunteering, and they were like, we could do some fundraising. We think these kids should go to Worlds of Fun. And called some of their friends and had some coffees and told them about the place and the children. And then they started a group called the Angels. And the Angels have now been in existence. It is a group of community folks that come together, and they really are the angels of the agency. They do things like bringing staff food. They come the first time when we're having graduation and we need people to come set up or decorate, they are the first ones we call. And then they also have orchestrated over the years our biggest fundraising event and helped us coordinate, plan, and bring their friends and families to these events. So the Angels. We also, as you know, have a Young Ambassador Board. About 15 years ago, started thinking about young professionals. How do we get them involved in philanthropy? How do we help them see in that, they may not have the monetary gifts, but they have time and energy and passion. And how do we harness that to help us do some of the work? So the Young Ambassador Board started. What's been funny about those, so you have these groups every year, they change over, 3 significant ones. When their terms ended for all these people, we had so many people saying, I don't want to leave the place, that we had to start these next level auxiliary groups. So now we have the Guardian Angels. it's the group of angels that have rolled off,
Yeah.
but they still get together and they still do so much for the agency. Our board now has a board alumni club called the Backs because they always come back. I know, it's amazing. This place gets under your skin.
It absolutely does.
You can speak to that.
I can. And then you have the teen board.
And then we started a teen board. Yeah, a few years ago. Again, getting young people involved in philanthropy. They have been instrumental in doing food drives, diaper drives out at their schools and their communities, and they help bring some of the tangible things into the organization. And again, influencing the worldview of these young teens. It's not unlike what happened to me. When I was in that age of who am I, what do I want to do, something happened and I met people that showed you care for others.
Totally.
And so I love to think that the teen board might be changing the trajectory of some people's lives.
Kansas City is obviously a very generous community. What do you feel like, if someone's new to the organization or wanting to get involved, what's one way that you feel like they can give back?
You know, I think first is really understanding who we are. Visiting our website, I think, gives you a really great sense of what we're about. And I think for anyone, they have to find a way that they feel fulfilled in what they're doing. You know, some people it is sending treasures, become a monthly donor, you know, just make that a really easy $20 a month. Those dollars are really important to us. Sometimes it is hosting a drive. I have young moms that are like, oh my gosh, I understand the need for, you know, diapers or whatnot. Let me ask all my friends to donate. So sometimes that's the meaningful way. It's also looking at our events. If you're social and you want to come, we have several events a year that people can attend. So there's lots of different ways you can get involved. We also sometimes need volunteers right here on site. And so we'll post those on our website and bring the community in.
That's a great way to incorporate them. So this series is obviously called Hype Girl Energy. It's all about supporting women, lifting women up. Who is a woman that you look up to and why?
I love meeting people and hearing their stories because there's strength in everybody. I love seeing how resiliency plays out. And the wisest people are the ones that have experienced the hardest things. So even when I meet families and figuring out how they're negotiating all the things that life has thrown at them, those are the women that inspire me and challenge me to see the world differently.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I like to think I sort of learn something from everyone.
Yeah. Well, and everyone has a lesson to share.
They do. And everyone, I think for women, having permission to tell their stories in their way is so important. And to break out of any model, to be whoever it is you want to be, is so important to me.
Unapologetically. Well, Anne, thank you so much for joining. What a great conversation and just so much insight. So I'm super, super grateful.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks for making the time to do this.
Of course.